Maria Santos stepped off the military transport bus, her worn duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The scorching sun beat down on Camp Harrison as she surveyed the training facility that would be her home for the next 12 weeks. At 22, she was older than most recruits, having worked 3 jobs to save enough money for her younger brother's medical bills before finally enlisting. The other recruits were already forming groups, their voices carrying across the dusty courtyard. Maria noticed how they sized each other up, looking for weakness or strength in their future comrades. She kept her head down, focusing on finding her assigned barracks rather than engaging in the social dynamics already beginning to unfold. "Hey, look what we got here," called out Jake Morrison, a tall recruit from Texas with a cocky grin. "Grandma decided to join the Army." His comment drew snickers from several others nearby. Maria was indeed older than the typical 18 and 19-year-old recruits, but she had learned long ago not to react to such provocations. Inside the barracks, Maria claimed a bottom bunk near the back corner. She began unpacking her few belongings with military precision, folding each item exactly as her father had taught her years ago. Her father had been a decorated sergeant before an injury ended his career early, and he had drilled proper military bearing into her from childhood. "You know they're going to eat you alive here," said a voice from the bunk above. Maria looked up to see Sarah Chen, a petite recruit with kind eyes. "Morrison and his crew think this is some kind of fraternity hazing. They don't realize what they're actually signing up for." Maria simply nodded and continued organizing her gear. She had learned the value of silence during her difficult childhood, when speaking up often meant more trouble. Her strategy had always been to let her actions speak louder than words, though she wondered if that approach would serve her well in military training. That evening during chow time, the harassment began in earnest. Morrison and his followers had apparently decided that Maria was an easy target. They made comments about her age, her quiet demeanor, and her decision to sit alone rather than trying to fit in with any particular group. "Maybe she's here because she couldn't make it in the real world," suggested another recruit named Tommy. "I heard some people join the military when they can't handle civilian life." The comment stung because it was partially true, though not in the way he meant. Maria had indeed struggled in civilian life, but not due to any personal failing. After dinner, Maria retreated to her bunk early, while others socialized or played cards. She pulled out a worn photograph of her younger brother Diego, who was now 14 and finally healthy, thanks to the surgery her enlistment bonus had funded. The doctors had said without the operation, he might not have lived to see his 15th birthday. She carefully tucked the photo into her footlocker and lay back on her narrow mattress. Through the thin walls, she could hear Morrison regaling others with stories of his high school football glory days and his plans to become a special forces operative. His confidence was infectious among the younger recruits, but Maria recognized it as the kind of bravado that often crumbled under real pressure. The next morning brought their first encounter with Drill Sergeant Martinez, a compact man whose voice could strip paint from walls. He addressed the assembled recruits with the kind of intensity that immediately separated the serious candidates from those who had joined on a whim. "Some of you think you're here to play soldier," Martinez barked, his eyes scanning the group. "Some of you think this is summer camp with guns. You are wrong. This program will break you down and build you back up, assuming you have what it takes to be rebuilt." His gaze lingered on Maria for a moment, neither approving nor disapproving, simply assessing. During their first physical training session, the mockery continued. Maria struggled with some of the exercises, her older body taking longer to adapt than her younger counterparts. Morrison made sure everyone noticed, loudly commenting on her performance whenever the drill instructors were out of earshot. "Come on, Grandma, my little sister could do better push-ups than that," he taunted during a brief water break. Other recruits laughed, though Maria noticed that Sarah Chen and a few others looked uncomfortable with the bullying. Maria said nothing, but something hardened in her chest. She had endured worse treatment than this, much worse, and she had survived. These boys had no idea what real adversity looked like, and she had no intention of letting them break her spirit. She simply wiped the sweat from her face and prepared for the next round of training. 3 weeks into training, the harassment had become a daily routine. Morrison and his followers seemed to take genuine pleasure in targeting Maria, making her the butt of jokes during meals, equipment inspections, and any moment when the drill instructors weren't paying close attention. They had given her the nickname Fossil, which spread through the platoon like wildfire. Maria's response remained the same: complete silence. She absorbed their taunts without reaction, completed her assigned tasks with methodical determination, and spent her free time studying military manuals while others socialized. Her academic test scores were consistently among the highest in the platoon, but this only seemed to fuel more resentment from her tormentors. Book smart doesn't mean battle smart, Morrison declared loudly after their latest written exam results were posted. When bullets start flying, nobody's going to care if you can memorize regulations. His comment drew approving nods from his circle of admirers, young men who hung on his every word as if he were already a decorated war hero. During weapons training, however, Maria began to show abilities that surprised everyone, including herself. Her hands were steady on the rifle range, her breathing controlled, her focus absolute. When the targets were collected, hers showed tight groupings that impressed even the notoriously hard-to-please firearms instructor. "Santos," called out Sergeant Williams after reviewing the scores. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" It was the first time any instructor had singled her out for positive attention, and Maria felt a small surge of pride. "My father taught me, Sergeant," she replied simply. What she didn't mention was that her father had insisted on teaching her self-defense after they moved to a rough neighborhood when she was 12. The shooting lessons had been part of a larger education in survival that had served her well during difficult years. Morrison's expression darkened at this unexpected display of competence. "Lucky shots," he muttered to his friends, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Wait until we get to the real challenges." The real challenges came sooner than expected. During their 4th week, the platoon was introduced to combat simulation exercises that would test not just their physical abilities but their mental toughness under pressure. The first exercise involved navigating an obstacle course while under simulated enemy fire, complete with smoke, loud noises, and disorienting lights. Maria watched the first few recruits attempt the course, noting their mistakes and analyzing the most efficient path through the obstacles. When her turn came, she moved with surprising grace and determination, her older body proving more resilient than many had expected. She completed the course in the second-best time of the day, beaten only by a recruit who had been a collegiate athlete. "Not bad for a fossil," Morrison said afterward, but his tone had shifted slightly. There was less mockery and more genuine assessment in his voice, as if he was beginning to recognize that he might have misjudged his target. That evening, Sarah Chen approached Maria during their brief recreation period. "You know, you don't have to take their garbage," she said quietly. "Some of us see what's happening and it's not right." Maria looked up from the military history book she was reading. "I've dealt with worse," she said simply. "Words can only hurt you if you let them." Sarah sat down beside her. "Maybe, but standing up for yourself isn't about getting hurt. It's about showing them you won't be pushed around forever." She paused, studying Maria's face. "There's something different about you. You're not like the rest of us." Maria considered this observation. It was true that she felt different from her fellow recruits, but not in the way Sarah might imagine. Her difference came from experiences that had aged her beyond her years, from responsibilities that had forced her to grow up faster than nature intended. The next day brought their introduction to hand-to-hand combat training. The instructor, a wiry sergeant named Rodriguez, demonstrated various defensive techniques before pairing off recruits for practice sessions. When he called for volunteers to demonstrate a particular move, Morrison immediately raised his hand. "I'll take the fossil," he announced with a grin, gesturing toward Maria. "Show everyone how it's done." The challenge was clear, and Maria could see that Rodriguez was waiting for her response. She stood up without hesitation. "Ready when you are," she said calmly, moving to the center of the training mat. Morrison was bigger and stronger, but Maria had learned long ago that size wasn't everything in a confrontation. Her father had taught her that lesson well during their self-defense sessions. As they faced each other, Maria noticed something in Morrison's eyes that hadn't been there before, a flicker of uncertainty. For the first time since arriving at camp, he seemed to realize that he might not know everything about the quiet woman he had been tormenting for weeks. The combat training session began with basic grappling techniques. Morrison approached the exercise with his usual overconfidence. expecting to easily overpower Maria through sheer size and strength. What he didn't anticipate was her understanding of leverage, timing, and the kind of practical fighting skills that came from real-world necessity rather than gymnasium practice. When Morrison lunged forward with excessive force, Maria stepped aside and used his momentum against him, sending him tumbling to the mat with a technique that looked almost effortless. The watching recruits fell silent, their expressions shifting from amusement to surprise. Morrison scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Lucky move," he growled, but Sergeant Rodriguez held up a hand to stop any further commentary. "That was textbook technique." "Santos," the instructor said approvingly. "Clean execution, proper form." "Morrison, you telegraphed that attack from next Tuesday. Try again, and this time think before you move." The second attempt went no better for Morrison. Maria anticipated his movements with an almost supernatural awareness, countering his attacks with precise economical motions that demonstrated years of training he knew nothing about. By the third takedown, the mockery in Morrison's eyes had been replaced by genuine respect tinged with frustration. After the session ended, the usual chatter and jokes were notably absent. Several recruits approached Maria with newfound interest, asking about her background and training. She deflected their questions politely, but the shift in group dynamics was unmistakable. The quiet woman they had dismissed was clearly more formidable than anyone had realized. That evening, Morrison confronted her directly for the first time. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" he asked without his usual swagger. They were alone in the equipment room, organizing gear after the day's training. Maria continued checking rifle components as she answered. "My father was military. He thought I should be able to protect myself." It was a simplified version of the truth, leaving out the dangerous neighborhood, the attempted assault when she was 16, and the months of intensive training that had followed. Morrison studied her face, searching for deception or boastfulness. Finding neither, he seemed to recalibrate his entire understanding of the woman he had been tormenting. "Why didn't you say anything before? When we were giving you a hard time? What would have been the point?" Maria asked, finally looking up from her work. "Proving I could fight wouldn't have changed anything except maybe getting me kicked out for unnecessary violence. I'm here to become a soldier, not to settle playground disputes." Her words stung because they contained an uncomfortable truth. Morrison realized that his behavior had indeed been juvenile, the kind of bullying that had no place in serious military training. For the first time since arriving at camp, he felt genuinely ashamed of his actions. Word of the combat training session spread quickly through the platoon. Maria found herself treated with a new level of respect, though she remained as quiet and focused as ever. She used the reduced harassment to concentrate even more intensely on her training, pushing herself to excel in every area of instruction. During their 6th week, the platoon faced their most challenging exercise yet, a 3-day field training mission that would test everything they had learned. They would be divided into squads and tasked with completing objectives while facing simulated enemy opposition and harsh environmental conditions. When squad assignments were announced, Maria found herself grouped with Morrison, Sarah Chen, and 3 other recruits, including Tommy, who had been one of Morrison's most enthusiastic followers in the early harassment campaign. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, and Maria wondered if the instructors had deliberately created this particular combination. Their squad leader was a senior recruit named Davis, who had been recycled from a previous training cycle due to an injury. He was older than most of the others and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had already faced the program's most difficult challenges. "Listen up," Davis told them during their first planning session. "This exercise will make or break half of you. The instructors are looking for leadership, teamwork, and the ability to perform under pressure. Personal conflicts stay behind, understood?" As they prepared for the field exercise, Maria noticed Morrison watching her with a different kind of attention than before. Instead of looking for weaknesses to exploit, he seemed to be assessing her capabilities as a potential team member. The shift was subtle but significant. On the night before they departed for the field, Maria sat alone cleaning her equipment when Morrison approached her again. This time his demeanor was entirely different from their previous encounters. "Santos," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. The way I've been treating you, the things I said, it was wrong. You didn't deserve that." Maria looked up at him, surprised by the genuine remorse in his voice. "Apology accepted," she said simply. "Can I ask you something?" Morrison continued. "Why did you really join the army? I mean, the real reason?" For a moment, Maria considered giving him another simplified answer. Instead, she found herself telling him about Diego, about the medical bills, about working multiple jobs while watching her brother grow sicker. She told him about the choice between her own dreams and her family's survival, and how the military had offered a path that could serve both. Morrison listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment before speaking again. "I joined because I thought it would be an adventure," he admitted, "because I wanted to prove I was tough. Hearing your story makes me realize how selfish that sounds." As they prepared for sleep, Maria reflected on the unexpected turn her training had taken. She had come to camp expecting to keep her head down and graduate without incident. Instead, she found herself becoming someone her fellow recruits looked to for guidance and strength, a role she had never sought but was beginning to embrace. The field training exercise began before dawn on a Monday morning. Maria's squad was loaded into military vehicles and transported to a remote training area that simulated hostile territory. Their mission was complex: infiltrate enemy positions, gather intelligence, and extract a simulated prisoner while avoiding detection and maintaining operational security. For the first day, everything went according to plan. Davis proved to be an excellent squad leader, making tactical decisions that kept them ahead of schedule, while avoiding the opposition forces played by advanced training cadre. Maria found herself naturally falling into the role of point person, her heightened awareness and ability to move quietly, making her ideal for scouting ahead. Morrison had transformed completely from the arrogant bully of their early training. He followed orders without complaint, supported his teammates, and showed genuine tactical thinking when situations required quick decisions. Tommy and the others had similarly adapted to the serious nature of their mission, putting aside personal conflicts in favor of squad cohesion. On the second day, disaster struck. Davis stepped wrong during a night movement and severely twisted his ankle, leaving him unable to continue at the pace their mission required. With their squad leader effectively out of commission, the group faced a critical leadership vacuum at the worst possible time. "Santos should take over," Morrison said immediately when they gathered to assess the situation. "She's been making the best tactical calls anyway." The suggestion surprised everyone, including Maria. Military training emphasized chain of command and formal leadership structures, but their current situation demanded practical solutions over protocol. Davis, grimacing with pain, nodded his agreement. "Morrison's right," he said. "Santos, your acting squad leader. Get us through this mission." Taking command felt natural to Maria in a way that surprised her. Years of managing family crises had taught her to think clearly under pressure and make difficult decisions quickly. She reorganized their formation, adjusted their route to accommodate Davis's injury, and developed contingency plans for multiple scenarios they might encounter. Under her leadership, the squad not only completed their primary objectives but exceeded expectations by gathering additional intelligence and successfully extracting 2 simulated prisoners instead of 1. They accomplished this while maintaining stealth and avoiding capture by opposition forces, a combination that impressed even the most critical instructors. When they returned to base camp on the third day, word of their exceptional performance had already spread. Drill Sergeant Martinez personally debriefed their squad, and Maria noticed a new level of respect in his voice when he addressed her directly. "Outstanding leadership, Santos," he said. "Your tactical decisions showed real understanding of field operations. That kind of thinking will serve you well in advanced training." The mention of advanced training caught Maria's attention. She had assumed that basic training was simply about meeting minimum standards for military service. The possibility of specialized assignments or leadership roles hadn't occurred to her when she enlisted primarily for financial reasons. That evening, the entire platoon gathered for their final week briefing. Camp Commander Colonel Patricia Reeves would be visiting to observe their graduation preparations and meet with selected recruits who had shown exceptional potential during training. The colonel will be conducting individual interviews with our top performers, announced Drill Sergeant Martinez. These conversations may influence future assignment opportunities and advanced training recommendations. Maria's name was on the interview list, along with Morrison Sarah Chen, and 3 other recruits who had distinguished themselves during various exercises. The prospect of meeting with such a senior officer was both exciting and nerve-wracking. As they prepared for the final week activities, Maria reflected on how dramatically her experience had changed. The quiet woman who had hoped to simply survive training had instead emerged as a recognized leader, whose abilities impressed both peers and instructors. The transformation felt surreal, like she was becoming someone she hadn't known existed within her. Morrison approached her after the briefing with a suggestion that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. "Want to study together for the final exams?" he asked. "I figure we could help each other prepare for the colonel's interviews too." They spent the next several evenings reviewing military procedures, discussing leadership scenarios, and sharing insights about their training experiences. Maria discovered that Morrison was actually quite intelligent when he wasn't trying to impress others with false bravado. Their conversations revealed a thoughtful person who had been hiding behind a facade of overconfidence. "I keep thinking about what you said about having real reasons for being here," Morrison confided during one of their study sessions. "Makes me wonder if I should have thought more seriously about why I enlisted." Maria considered his words carefully before responding. "Maybe the reasons you started with don't matter as much as the person you choose to become along the way. You're not the same guy who got off the bus 2 months ago." The observation was true for both of them. Training had stripped away pretenses and revealed core character traits that might have remained hidden in civilian life. Maria had discovered leadership abilities she never knew she possessed, while Morrison had found humility and genuine respect for others beneath his youthful arrogance. As their final week began, anticipation built toward the graduation ceremony and their meetings with Colonel Reeves. Maria had no idea that the colonel's visit would involve far more than routine interviews, or that her past was about to intersect with her military future in ways she could never have anticipated. The night before their individual meetings, Maria lay awake thinking about how far she had come from the scared young woman who had made desperate choices to save her brother's life. Military training had given her more than just career opportunities. It had revealed strength and capabilities she was only beginning to understand. Colonel Patricia Reeves arrived at Camp Harrison on a Tuesday morning with an entourage that included several staff officers and what appeared to be intelligence personnel. Her presence commanded immediate attention throughout the base, as even senior instructors adjusted their posture and sharpened their focus when she passed by. Maria waited outside the administration building for her scheduled interview, reviewing military protocols and trying to calm her nerves. Through the window, she could see other recruits entering and leaving the colonel's temporary office, some looking confident, others appearing shaken by whatever had transpired during their meetings. When her turn came, Maria entered the office with crisp military bearing and rendered a perfect salute. Colonel Reeves was younger than expected, perhaps in her early 40s, with intelligent eyes that seemed to assess everything at once. Her uniform displayed ribbons indicating extensive combat experience and specialized training. "At ease, Santos," the colonel said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "I've been reading impressive reports about your performance here. Your instructors speak very highly of your leadership abilities and tactical thinking." Maria sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap. "Thank you, ma'am. I've tried to give my best effort to the training." Colonel Reeves studied the file open before her, occasionally glancing up to observe Maria's demeanor. "Your background is interesting. Older than most recruits, worked multiple civilian jobs, primary motivation listed as family financial obligations. Tell me about your decision to enlist." Maria provided a straightforward account of her circumstances, focusing on her brother's medical needs and her family's financial situation. She was careful to present the facts without seeking sympathy or making excuses for her unconventional path to military service. "And yet," the colonel continued, "your performance suggests capabilities far beyond what we typically see from recruits with purely financial motivations. Your combat skills, in particular, indicate extensive prior training. Where did you acquire those abilities?" The question touched on sensitive territory that Maria had deliberately avoided discussing in detail. "My father provided basic self-defense instruction, ma'am. He believed it was important for personal safety." Colonel Reeves leaned back in her chair, her expression suggesting she suspected there was more to the story. "Basic self-defense doesn't typically produce the kind of advanced techniques your instructors observed. But we'll leave that for now. I'm more interested in your future plans. Have you given thought to career specialization within the military? Maria admitted that she had initially focused only on completing basic training and beginning regular military service. The possibility of specialized roles or advanced training hadn't been part of her original planning, though recent experiences had opened her mind to new possibilities. I have a proposition for you. Santos, the colonel said, closing the file and giving Maria her full attention. There are opportunities available for exceptional individuals who demonstrate the right combination of skills, intelligence, and character. These opportunities come with additional training, increased responsibility, and significantly enhanced career prospects. The offer was vague, but clearly significant. Maria sensed that the colonel was testing her response to ambiguous situations, evaluating how she processed incomplete information and uncertain prospects. I would be honored to serve wherever the military determines I can be most useful. Ma'am, Maria replied carefully. Colonel Reeves smiled slightly, apparently pleased with the diplomatic response. That's exactly the kind of answer I was hoping to hear. However, before we proceed further, I need to discuss something that may be uncomfortable. Our background investigation process has uncovered some information about your past that requires clarification. Maria's heart rate increased, though she maintained her composed exterior. There were aspects of her history that she had hoped would remain private, experiences that had shaped her but that she preferred not to revisit. During your teenage years, you were involved in an incident that resulted in the hospitalization of an adult male. The colonel continued, consulting another document. The official report lists it as self-defense, but the details suggest a level of force and technique that goes well beyond typical defensive actions. The memory came flooding back, despite Maria's efforts to suppress it. She was 16, walking home from her evening job at a restaurant when a man had attempted to assault her in an alley. Her father's training had taken over, and she had responded with devastating effectiveness, leaving her attacker with multiple broken bones and internal injuries. The incident was investigated thoroughly, ma'am, Maria said quietly. No charges were filed. It was determined to be justified self-defense. I'm not questioning the justification, Santos. I'm interested in the capabilities it revealed. According to the police report, you disabled an adult male who was significantly larger and stronger than you were, using techniques that the investigating officers described as professional-level combat skills. That level of ability doesn't develop from casual training. Colonel Reeves set the document aside and studied Maria directly. I'm going to ask you directly, and I need a completely honest answer. What kind of training did your father really provide, and why? Maria realized that evasion was no longer possible. The colonel clearly knew more than she was initially revealing, and any attempt at deception would only damage her credibility. She took a deep breath and began telling the complete truth about her childhood. Her father hadn't just been a soldier. He had been special operations with expertise in unconventional warfare and personal combat. After his injury-related discharge, he had struggled with civilian life and eventually settled in a dangerous neighborhood where Maria and her mother were frequently at risk. Rather than move to a safer area they couldn't afford, her father had decided to ensure that his family could protect themselves. Maria's training had been intensive and comprehensive, covering not just basic self-defense but advanced combat techniques, tactical awareness, and psychological preparation for violent encounters. When the colonel finished listening to Maria's account, she was quiet for several minutes, apparently processing the implications of what she had learned. Finally, she spoke again, and her tone had shifted to something more serious and purposeful. Santos, what I'm about to discuss with you cannot be shared with your fellow recruits or anyone else without proper clearance. Do you understand? Maria nodded, sensing that her military career was about to take a direction she had never anticipated. Colonel Reeves stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the training fields where recruits were conducting afternoon exercises. Her silence stretched long enough that Maria began to wonder if she had said something wrong, but she maintained her position and waited for the colonel to continue. Your father was Captain Eduardo Santos, 7th Special Forces Group, the colonel said without turning around. I know because I served with him during Operation Desert Shield. He was one of the finest soldiers I ever had the privilege of working alongside. Maria's surprise was complete. In all her years of hearing about her father's military service, he had never mentioned specific units or operations. She had known he was Special Forces, but the details had always been vague, classified, or simply too painful for him to discuss. He never told me he knew you. Ma'am, Maria said carefully. Colonel Reeves turned back to face her. We lost touch after his medical discharge. I heard about his struggles with civilian adjustment, but I never knew he had a family. If I had known, I might have been able to help. There was genuine regret in her voice, the kind that came from missed opportunities to assist a fellow soldier. He did his best with the circumstances he had, ma'am. His training probably saved my life that night. I'm sure it did. Eduardo was exceptional at teaching combat skills, but more importantly, he understood the psychological aspects of survival. That's a rare combination. The colonel returned to her desk and opened a different file, this one marked with security classifications that Maria couldn't read from her position. Which brings me to why I'm really here, Santos. Your performance in basic training, combined with your background and demonstrated capabilities, has brought you to the attention of people in very specialized positions. We have need for individuals who can think independently, adapt to dangerous situations, and maintain operational security under extreme pressure. Maria sensed that she was being recruited for something far beyond conventional military service. The colonel's carefully chosen words and the security markings on the documents suggested intelligence work or special operations, fields she had never considered entering. I'm honored by your confidence, ma'am, but I should mention that my original goal was simply to complete my service obligation and use the benefits to continue my education. I hadn't planned on a military career. Plans change, Santos, especially when circumstances reveal capabilities that demand different choices. What I'm offering you is not just a career, but the chance to serve in ways that make a real difference in national security. The training would be extensive, the work would be challenging, and the risks would be significant. The colonel paused to let Maria absorb this information before continuing. However, before any of this becomes relevant, there's something else we need to address. Your complete background investigation has revealed something that changes everything we've discussed so far. Maria felt a chill of apprehension. She had been completely honest about her past, or so she thought. There were no hidden criminal activities, no security risks that she was aware of, nothing that should disqualify her from military service or special assignments. Ma'am, I've been truthful about everything. If there's some issue with my background, I'm not aware of what it might be. Colonel Reeves smiled, but it wasn't the reassuring expression Maria had hoped to see. Instead, it was the kind of smile that suggested significant complications ahead. The issue isn't what you've done, Santos. It's who you are. Our investigation discovered that your father wasn't just special forces. For the last 3 years of his service, he was involved in a classified program that has never been officially acknowledged. The details are still restricted, but the program involved deep cover operations in areas where conventional military presence was impossible. Maria tried to process this information. Her father had never hinted at involvement in classified operations beyond normal special forces activities. She had assumed his reluctance to discuss his service was simply due to standard confidentiality requirements and personal trauma. I don't understand what this has to do with me. Ma'am, during his final operation, your father obtained information that was considered so sensitive it required permanent classification. He was debriefed extensively before his discharge, but certain protocols remained in effect regarding his family. Specifically, any children who chose military service would be flagged for special attention. The colonel opened the classified file and showed Maria a document that bore her father's signature alongside official seals she didn't recognize. Your father agreed to these protocols as part of his discharge agreement. He knew that if you ever enlisted, this conversation would eventually take place. Maria stared at the document, trying to understand the implications of what she was learning. Her decision to join the military had apparently activated security procedures that had been waiting dormant for years, set in motion by agreements her father had made before she was even born. What does this mean for my service, ma'am? It means that your original plans for simple military service and educational benefits are no longer possible. Your background, your capabilities, and your father's history have combined to place you in a position where ordinary service would actually create security risks that we cannot accept. The reality of her situation began to sink in. Maria had enlisted thinking she was making a straightforward financial decision to help her family. Instead, she had unknowingly activated a complex web of security protocols that would determine her future in ways she had never anticipated. You have two choices, Santos, the colonel continued. You can accept assignment to specialized training and eventual placement in operations that will utilize your unique background and abilities. Or you can accept an honorable discharge and return to civilian life, with the understanding that certain monitoring protocols will remain in effect indefinitely. Maria realized that her quiet life as an anonymous soldier was ending before it had truly begun. Either choice would lead her into territory she had never expected to navigate, with consequences that extended far beyond her original goals of financial stability and educational opportunities. Maria sat in stunned silence, processing the enormity of what Colonel Reeves had revealed. The simple decision to enlist for her brother's medical expenses had somehow evolved into a choice between specialized military service she had never sought and a civilian life that would be permanently shadowed by government monitoring. Ma'am, may I ask what happened to my father during that final operation? What information was so sensitive that it's still affecting his family years later? Colonel Reeves hesitated, clearly weighing how much she could reveal. Your father's team discovered evidence of a weapons trafficking network that involved individuals in positions of significant political and military authority. The scope of the conspiracy was so extensive that full disclosure would have compromised national security and endangered numerous ongoing operations. The explanation helped Maria understand her father's struggles after his discharge. He hadn't just been dealing with physical injuries and adjustment difficulties. He had been carrying the burden of classified knowledge that he could never share or fully process with anyone. He agreed to the family monitoring protocols because he wanted to ensure that if his children ever entered government service, they would be properly protected from any residual threats, the colonel continued. What he couldn't have anticipated was that his daughter would develop capabilities that make her invaluable for exactly the kind of work he used to do. Maria thought about Diego, about her original reasons for enlisting, about the life she had planned. Then she considered the alternative. Accepting discharge and living with the knowledge that her father's sacrifices had created opportunities she was too frightened to pursue. If I accept the specialized assignment, what would that mean for my brother? For my family's financial situation? Your family's medical expenses would be handled through special programs that provide comprehensive care for dependents of classified personnel. Your brother would receive the best possible treatment, and your educational benefits would be enhanced significantly. However, you would have limited contact with them during training periods, and your assignments might require extended deployments. The colonel stood and moved to her briefcase, withdrawing a thick envelope sealed with official markings. This contains preliminary information about the training program, should you choose to accept. I need your decision within 24 hours. As Maria took the envelope, Colonel Reeves made one final observation. There's something else, Santos. During your combat training here, your instructors noted that you have an unusual ability to remain calm under pressure and make tactical decisions that suggest advanced situational awareness. Those aren't skills that can be taught easily. They're often innate talents that surface under the right circumstances. Maria realized the colonel was referring to abilities she had always taken for granted. Her capacity to assess threats, her instinctive understanding of human behavior under stress, her ability to find solutions in chaotic situations had all seemed like normal responses to the challenges of her difficult childhood. Your father had similar talents, which is why he was selected for his final assignment. The apple, as they say, rarely falls far from the tree. That evening, Maria walked alone around the base perimeter, wrestling with the most important decision of her life. Her fellow recruits were preparing for graduation, excited about their upcoming assignments and the completion of basic training. She envied their straightforward paths and uncomplicated futures. When she returned to the barracks, Morrison was waiting for her. "You missed chow," he said. "Saved you some food." His concern was genuine, reflecting the friendship that had developed from their rocky beginning. "Thanks," Maria said, accepting the meal without much appetite. "Everything okay? You've seemed distracted since your meeting with the colonel." Maria wished she could share her dilemma with someone, but the security restrictions made that impossible. Instead, she deflected his concern with general comments about career uncertainty and future planning. Later that night, she opened the classified envelope in private. The documents inside described training programs she had never heard of, assignments in locations that weren't supposed to exist, and career paths that operated completely outside normal military structures. The work was dangerous, demanding, and absolutely fascinating. One document particularly caught her attention: a psychological profile assessment that described individuals suited for unconventional, problem-solving in high-stress environments with minimal oversight. The description could have been written specifically about her experiences, growing up in dangerous circumstances while caring for a sick brother and absent father. As dawn approached, Maria made her decision. She thought about her father's sacrifices, her brother's recovery, and the unexpected discovery of capabilities she was only beginning to understand. The path ahead was uncertain and risky, but it offered the chance to honor her family's legacy while serving something larger than herself. When Colonel Reeves returned the next morning for her answer, Maria was ready. She stood at attention and delivered her decision with the same quiet confidence that had carried her through 12 weeks of grueling training. "Ma'am, I accept the assignment." The colonel smiled with what appeared to be genuine pleasure. "Outstanding. Your new training begins immediately after graduation. There's just one more thing we need to address before you begin." She gestured toward the door, and Maria noticed for the first time that there was someone waiting outside. An older man entered the room, moving with the careful precision of someone accustomed to dangerous situations. When he turned to face her, Maria's breath caught in recognition. It was her father, Eduardo Santos, looking healthier and more focused than she had seen him in years. He was wearing civilian clothes, but his bearing was unmistakably military. Most surprisingly, he was smiling with pride and satisfaction. "Hello, mija," he said simply. "I think it's time we had a real conversation about our family business." Colonel Reeves stepped back as father and daughter stared at each other across the small room. "Your father has been working as a civilian contractor for the same program he served in during his active duty. His discharge was actually a cover to allow him to continue operations in a different capacity." Maria felt the last pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Her father's mysterious absences, his extensive knowledge of current events, his insistence on advanced combat training, even their move to the dangerous neighborhood where she had first used those skills in real combat. It had all been preparation for this moment. "You knew," she said to her father. "You knew I would eventually end up here." Eduardo nodded. "I hoped you would. Everything I taught you, every skill I made sure you developed, was because I believed you had the potential to serve in ways that matter. The choice was always yours to make, but I wanted you to be ready if you chose this path." As the implications of her new reality settled in, Maria realized that her journey was just beginning. The mockery and challenges of basic training had been the easiest part of what lay ahead. But for the first time since enlisting, she felt truly prepared for whatever came next. The quiet woman who had endured weeks of harassment had discovered not just her own strength, but her place in a legacy of service that connected her to something much larger than she had ever imagined. As she prepared to leave basic training behind, Maria Santos was ready to become the person her father had always believed she could be.